Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for another Make It Again Monday. I have a set of 5 cards that cover off a number of occasions. I'm using one of my favorite embossing folders, Simon Says Stamps Wildflower Field. And along with this, I'm also going to be focusing on a technique that I haven't done for a while and I absolutely love. So here we go with another session of using acrylic paint with embossing folders. For this technique, you will require a brayer and also something nice and flat and smooth that you can put your acrylic paint on. For this technique, I like to work with distress paints. I have tried other brands, but I find that the consistency of the distress paint seems to work best for me. Having said that, most of my color will come from the distress paints. However, I am going to be using a product that is new to me by Folk Art. It is a gloss metallic called White Flash, and it adds a beautiful shimmer to the finished product. You can see a dollop of that creamy colored paint on my plate right now. It's quite a bit thicker than the other paint. I am going to be using it in conjunction with the distress paints because it'll make it a little bit more fluid and easier to roll on. I will be embossing panels of Neenah Classic Crest 110 pound cardstock, and I start off at a full A2 size, 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. Depending on the die cutter that you're using and the thickness of the embossing folder, the sandwich or the layers that you put together to feed the embossing folder through will vary. For today's project, I'll be using Spellbinder's Platinum Die Cutter. For this machine and this particular embossing folder, the best sandwich for me was to use just the platform with a couple of thicknesses of cardstock on top. I did not use the die cutting plates at all. I'm going to be working with different shades of blue and lilac paint. All of these colors work well together, so between panels I don't bother cleaning up the acrylic plate. I just add more paint and carry on. There needs to be a consistent amount of paint on the roller. It doesn't roll well on the acrylic plate. After I've picked up some paint, I lightly roll it on some paper towel. It has enough texture to help spread that paint consistently around the roller. I apply several layers of thin paint to the embossing folder. There's no rush and no need to worry about the paint drying. If too much paint is applied at once, it will go into the debossed areas. I know I'm repeating myself, but once that roller has been primed by rolling it onto the paper towel, it is much more effective to apply several thin layers of paint to the embossing folder. Though I do not clean the acrylic plate between panels, I do clean the embossing folder. Do not want paint to build up because again it will go into those debossed areas. I don't want to be running back and forth to my sink, which is on the other side of the house. So I spray the panel liberally with water, line it with a couple of thicknesses of paper towel and run that through the embossing machine, and that cleans it fairly well. The end of the project, it is cleaned thoroughly in hot soapy water. And here are my 5 completed panels. They're sitting in a spatter box. I've watered down some white gouache and I'm using a fan brush and applying a fine spatter across the panels. This project was also another opportunity to choose some of my favorite die cut sentiments by Simon Says Stamp. I have die cut both white cardstock and sheet foam. For the 3 sentiments that are either large or fine, I have left them in the foam backing and I'm just removing the centers of the letters. I'm applying a thin stream of glue to the foam sentiment. This is a big sentiment that I'm working on now and I just love it. I wanted it to really stand out from the card like the other sentiments, so it's going to be foam mounted. I was wondering how difficult it was going to be getting the cardstock sentiment aligned to the foam one, but the impression that is left in the foam die cut makes it very easy to pop right into place. And then I just use my craft pick in the openings of the letters to do any final adjustments. I don't want anything to slip out of alignment, so my foam back sentiments are set aside to dry completely before I remove the excess foam. Two of the die cut sentiments that I'm using have a font that's just a little bit wider, and so it's easy to stack it directly on the foam die cut without it being in its foam backing. The embossed panels are trimmed down to 3 5/8 by 4 7/8 inches. They are adhered to a pretty scalloped rectangle panel. And then on they go to a top folding A2 sized card base. Then it is just a matter of popping on those die cut sentiments. Because they're being adhered to a surface that is not smooth, I pop some light weight on them just to make sure that there's good contact with the card front. Cards are finished up with some beautiful confetti by Studio Kasha called Crystal Clear. The confetti is finished off with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. When it is dry, it is clear, giving them a gorgeous jewel-like appearance. I hope you enjoyed this session of Make It Again Monday, featuring a gorgeous embossing folder by Simon Says Stamp called Wildflower Field. Working with acrylic paint and embossing folders is a fast and effective way to create multiple cards. I love that I have 5 cards for different occasions just ready to be used. Thank you for stopping by, and as always, I appreciate your visit.